I mean, it looks vaguely right on an easel, which has been there for the whole series, and I've never quite understood why they've taken this decision to have this picture on it. So that is wrong. There was no.
Crikey.
Hello, I'm Dr Nigel Fletcher. I'm a political historian and a writer. I also have a bit of an interest in looking at the history of the monarchy and the British royal family. So, we've got a new series of The Crown just come out on Netflix. The first 4 episodes have just dropped today of the last series, and beginning controversially with the events of 1997. So I imagine it's going to be generating quite a lot of headlines, quite a lot of interest online. So I've never done a react video before, but I'm going to do that and give some of my first thoughts. Right, so I'm going to stick these in. And here we go. Well, no messing around. We're in Paris for the start of this episode, so heading straight in to the tragic events of August 1997. Crikey. Well, there's, as I said, no messing about on that. Starting the series with the crash in Paris that killed Diana, Princess of Wales. I think that's going to be the real controversial point of this series. Just to talk whilst the credits are going, I think this is going to be a really difficult one to get right, to be honest, because these are not just events that are within living memory. There's a lot of people watching the series who will have their own very strong memories of this time and the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. But also a lot of the people involved, not least the King and his children, William and Harry, are very much still around. And this is a topic that is, of course, extremely sensitive. So people will have, I think, very strong views about this in a way that perhaps they didn't have about the early series of The Crown. It's not the first time that Peter Morgan, the writer, has tackled this. He produced the film The Queen, which deals with the week of Diana's death. So this is a return to the subject for him. So we're after that pre-credit sequence, we're now back in time. Diana, Princess of Wales, driving 8 weeks earlier. I assume this is supposed to be Chequers. Diana and William arriving at Chequers with Tony and Cherie. Right, just going to pause it there. This visit did happen. Tony Blair has written about it in his memoirs. Diana and William did indeed go to Chequers. Tony Blair, of course, had only recently become Prime Minister in May 1997. And this did happen. He writes in his memoir about how Prince William was playing football with his children, with Tony Blair's children. Of course, when we get to the point at which Tony Blair has to respond to the death of Diana, it makes it more poignant because we know that they had met several times actually, and they'd had this meeting at Chequers. So that is certainly true. A couple of other points of detail there. Chequers, I mean, it looks vaguely right. It is a Tudor mansion in the Cotswolds, and that look of it, the red brick there, looks vaguely like checkers, so that's quite accurate. Also, the car. There's quite an interesting story about Diana's car. I think that's an Audi. And somebody I know, Ian Dale, the broadcaster on LBC, has got a great story about how he once owned Princess Diana's car. He bought it whilst some years before this, I think in the early 90s, and sold it. And he says one of the worst decisions he ever took was to sell it, because obviously it would be worth a lot of money now. So yes, so that's the visit to Chequers. That did take place. Let's start again. We're now back in the audience with Tony Blair and the Queen. So we've got there a representation of this weekly meeting that takes place between the Prime Minister of the day and the Sovereign, and Tony Blair meeting the Queen there. That forms quite a large part of the narrative of the other Peter Morgan film, the Queen, and he also wrote a stage play about it as well. Called The Audience, and I always describe these as Schrodinger's meeting, because no one knows what happens apart from the two people themselves. They never leak. The Queen had 15 prime ministers over the course of her reign, and all of them have spoken about how they found it a really valuable thing to do, to speak to the Queen on a weekly basis, and to sort of take advantage of all of the huge amount of wisdom that she'd accumulated over the course of her reign. But we don't know what's said there. So these scenes that we see throughout the series of The Crown, going all the way back to the first series, they're all imagined. We don't know what is said about any of the issues that are being talked about. So as a dramatic device, they're quite useful, because we get to have the main protagonists, the Queen and the Prime Minister of the day, talking about politics and so. But we have seen a few clips of these kind of meetings. There's occasionally documentaries that have taken place where they filmed bits of these meetings. Obviously, for the cameras, we're not going to see the sort of detailed conversations. But what strikes me about it is that these are always a bit, on The Crown, these are always a bit more stagey. We have these very great sort of, bits of dialogue that are all very sort of, are very profound. And from what we've seen of the Queen's interactions with her prime ministers on some of these documentaries, it tends to be, I think, a lot more informal when we see those. And I think on some of these issues, very unlikely that they would sort of take them quite on the nose in the way that sometimes they do. But in terms of the audience room there that they always show in Buckingham Palace, that's fairly accurate. The Queen had a room in Buckingham Palace alongside her private apartment. So as you look at the front of Buckingham Palace on the right hand side, that wing there was the Queen's private apartments, rather than the staterooms that get opened for tourists. And alongside her private apartments, there was a room there called the audience room. Most famous, if you saw the opening ceremony of the London 2012 Olympics, that's the room in which James Bond, Daniel Craig, comes in and sees the Queen. That's her audience room. And so the room here that they use for that in The Crown, I'm not sure where it is actually that they filmed that. It's fairly accurate, apart from the painting on an easel, which has been there for the whole series. And I've never quite understood why they've taken this decision to have this picture on a stand there for some reason. But that doesn't really reflect anything in there. But the audience room itself looks fairly much as it does. But as you say, the actual dialogue that takes place, we don't know what goes on there. So it's a useful dramatic device, but I think we take with a pinch of salt the kind of dialogue that goes on. So let's press on. A classic bit of exposition there. There we are. So, okay. So we've got there the then Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, at that's Highgrove. That's supposed to be his country home, which he still has. One of his favourite homes, which he took over in the 1980s and has become sort of his his pride and joy, his gardens there. It's his refuge. So one of his favourite homes. And what we're seeing there is the preparations for the 50th birthday party of his then partner, Camilla Parker Bowles, before they were married. Yeah, I mean, apart from the fact you've got a clunky bit of exposition there, just sort of laying out sort of a reminder to the viewer of what's been going on in terms of his divorce and so on. But talking about the campaign for Camilla to be accepted by the public, very unlikely. I think we can agree that you would have quite such a sort of quite such an explicit sort of discussion of it like that amongst people who know exactly what he's talking about anyway. But it is true that this was a concerted campaign that was being mounted by advisors to the then Prince of Wales, notably Mark Boland, who was taken on as his press secretary, and he sort of masterminded this sort of campaign of acceptance to try and bring Camilla Parker Bowles sort of into the Prince of Wales's public life, and this is a significant moment in that. Really, there was an attempt here to try and give some legitimacy and respectability to the relationship. They've been living really together for a while, and they were trying to win acceptance from the public. But a mention there also of trying to win acceptance from Her Majesty the Queen as well, his mother. And that, of course, is something which does play out over the sort of years beyond this. I don't think it's quite right that he would have been expecting the Queen to attend. I think it was made pretty clear that this would have been a big step for the Queen to acknowledge this relationship at that point. And so I don't think, and if it looks as though this is going to be part of the sort of drama of this episode, really of trying to suggest that the Prince of Wales was very keen for the Queen to attend that. I'm sure he would have liked her to attend, but I think he was quite realistic at this time that it was a gradual process. But yeah, so I think that's just really setting the scene for it. And as I say, the location, Highgrove, I mean, it looks fairly similar. So let's carry on. We're heading. Yeah. So that, I think, is quite an interesting scene. Where are you? Over there. Sorry, I'm looking at the screen. You've got what I assume is supposed to be Mark Boland, the sort of media advisor to the Prince of Wales, talking to them there about the sort of the way it plays, and they would have had these kind of conversations about the presentation of Mrs. PB, as they called her, Camilla Parker Bowles, as she then was, and the sort of progress towards acceptance. And so, yeah, discussion of things like opinion polls and how things are being presented within that very small group, particularly, close advisor Mark Boland himself and the Prince of Wales. I'm sure they would have had those kind of conversations, and talking about Diana as well and her public profile. A lot of the columnists who write about sort of royal family sort of things all the time, they were really going for Diana. There was quite a lot of criticism of her, which made the reaction when she died quite poignant, really, because there were people who had been quite nasty about her. But the reason for that was because this holiday in Saint-Tropez that we're seeing playing out in this episode got a lot of attention. It was on the front of all the papers. But it was seen as as a bit tawdry, really, taking the children, taking Prince William and Prince Harry to go on holiday with Mohammed Fayed, who was a controversial figure. I mean, he was implicated This is 1997 we're talking about, so prior to that general election that year, the Conservative government of John Major had fallen to a landslide defeat in the wake of a lot of scandal around cash for questions, and Mohammed Fayed was the guy who was paying the cash. He was the guy who had offered money in brown envelopes to Tory MPs, and so this is a businessman who was not seen as being a particularly respectable person, very controversial figure, and for the Princess of Wales to be going on holiday with him and striking up this kind of friendship at the time with his son, it attracted a lot of criticism at the time. So seeing the Prince of Wales' team discussing that and how Diana's profile is coming under some scrutiny, I think that's right. So looking at this party scene here, you've got the Prince of Wales making a speech, quite an emotional speech of tribute to Camilla at her birthday party, whilst Princess Margaret sits alongside as the only member of the royal family to attend. So that is wrong. There was no member of the royal family there. Princess Margaret wasn't there, and also we hear from the reports of the event. There was no speech either. I think Camilla's son said a few words, or sort of said happy birthday and raised a toast. But from the reports of the time, there was certainly no speech from the Prince of Wales there. But a useful scene, I suppose, in terms of trying to sort of display the affection between the couple, and clearly the event is a sign of their partnership. Sometimes in The Crown we see events being kind of conveniently put together. This was true. There was quite a contrast there between obviously the coverage that was taking place of the party and Saint-Tropez and Diana, Princess of Wales. So they've got that pretty accurate. But the details of the party, no, there was no speech there. And and Princess Margaret not there, so I don't quite know why they've put Princess Margaret into the party. She wasn't there. Well, that's nice. A phone call there between the Queen and the Prince of Wales. Again, total invention. We don't know the conversations that they had, but I think what that captures quite well is the fact that, as we've seen throughout all the series of The Crown, there is a difference between Elizabeth II as a person and as sovereign. Sometimes I think they do that a bit clunkily. You have moments where, particularly in the earlier series with Princess Margaret, where you have the Queen sort of saying, "I didn't deny you as a person. It was the Crown, the sovereign," and drawing this very clear distinction between her role as head of state and a person. But actually, whilst I think you wouldn't necessarily have it put in quite such direct terms, that is the reality. And in this situation as well, with Charles and Camilla, the Queen was in a very difficult position. You had the spectre of divorce having had a huge impact on the royal family, going all the way back to the abdication crisis in 1936, and it was a real difficulty, and for the heir to the throne, who was going to become the sovereign and be head of the Church of England, to be a divorced man and then to be looking to remarry, fraught with difficulty. And this was a big controversy over this period of time. This is the whole sort of drama of it. And so the Queen was in a very difficult position. And so whatever her personal feelings about her son's happiness, there were other considerations, just as there were previously with Princess Margaret earlier on in the series and in the 1950s. So I think what that phone call there captures is sort of the fact that the Queen may have been very willing to accept the fact that Charles and Camilla were going to be in a relationship and were happy together, but that's quite different to her giving her formal approval to it, and this sort of campaign for public acceptance sort of continued. But yeah, I think that is again, it's an invented conversation, but I think it captures probably sort of where the Queen was. Someone who finds it very difficult to reconcile the sort of two sides of her role as a mother and as a person, and as head of state and the Queen. So that's the whole point of the series, really. And I think that phone call encapsulates that pretty well. She's happy that Charles is happy. That doesn't mean she's going to rush into giving public acceptance to a relationship which, even before the events of 1997, was a pretty controversial one. She said the name of the episode. Ding. And there we are, the end of the episode. So we're heading now towards the events of Paris. That episode, I think, sort of sets the scene. We're obviously focusing a lot on Diana and Dodie's relationship. On that, I think it's certainly true that the relationship with Dodie that starts in Saint-Tropez there, it is true that he had a fiancée. She was pretty much sort of dumped in this sort of yacht alongside, and Dodie is summoned there by his father, Mohammed Fayed, and it is very much a case, really, of his father sort of trying to engineer this very public sort of courtship and relationship with Diana. He's somebody who is, as has been shown in the previous series, actually absolutely desperate for acceptance by the British establishment, and someone who has sort of become a controversial figure for that reason. And so, having seen in previous series that Diana had this rather touching relationship with a surgeon, Hazmat Khan, which never became public at the time, and was clearly a very important relationship from everything that we've heard since. This is something else. This is a very public display, and she is seen with Dodie in Saint-Tropez. She's a guest of Mohammed Al Fayed. This is not something which is being hidden. So the criticism that she was facing at the time was that this was a deliberate attempt, firstly to upstage Camilla and her 50th birthday party, but also generally to sort of make a show of being free and pursuing a romantic life for herself. So when we get on to the next bit, this sort of the tragic sort of last bit of the romance between Dodie and Diana, it's worth bearing in mind that this was engineered certainly at the outset by Mohammed Al Fayed, and he was very keen for it to be very public, and I think that plays a significant part in what happens next. To bear that in mind, and we don't really know how Diana felt about it, but clearly there was a degree of friendship between them that started in Saint-Tropez, and then we have apparently it is true that he sent these elaborate gifts and flowers to her, and then sort of invited her to Paris. So that's certainly true, but how much of that was at the instigation of his father, who was very keen for this relationship to be pursued, we don't know. But overall, yeah, I'll move on to watch the next episode now. It is keeping me watching. Really, just to sort of see how they deal with what is a particularly crucial time for the royal family after the death of Diana. It was a massive event. So for the moment, I think that's my first React video, and I think certain aspects of it, there's a problem with the fact that a lot of these conversations never took place. But some of the details in it are pretty accurate, and we'll see how we get on with the next one. Join me for the next video.